6:01, Monday, July 6th. I will call to order the Winooski City Council meeting. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance led by Deputy Mayor Hal Colston.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is agenda review. Are there any questions or concerns about the order of the agenda? Any concerns from the public? I should share for members of the public who are joining, if you are using Zoom, please use the raise hand feature to indicate if you want to speak. If you are calling in by phone, you can press *9. Again, if you press *9, that will let the host know that you wish to speak. Which brings us to the public comment section of our meeting. So this is a chance for the public, if you want to speak about something that is not included on the agenda, now would be the time to do so. So again, if you're on Zoom, you would raise hand, click raise hand in the participant panel. And if you're calling in by phone, press *9. So I'll give it a moment to see if we have any public comment. All right. Next is our consent agenda. So we have several items this evening. We have our city council minutes from June 15th, our payroll warrants, the Chittenden Solid Waste District FY21 budget, which we saw a meeting or two ago, the Community Justice Center FY21 budget 0 out, which we discussed in our last meeting, Hickox Street bond documents, moving that work forward, and the Gotcha e-bike agreement that we had maybe a year ago and was delayed for several reasons. So that is included in here again. I do think we might need to pull the city council minutes out separately since Hal wasn't here for that entire meeting. So if we could just vote on the city council minutes of June 15th. Would someone like to make a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Jim, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those abstaining? Motion carries. So we have several items left. Are there any questions or concerns about any of the items in this consent agenda? So I would take a motion to approve items B through F in the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Amy, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. Next up is council reports. Can I start with Hal this time? Oh, you're on mute, Hal.
I have no report at this time, but I'm glad to be in recess from the legislature. So hoping to reconnect with the Charter Change Commission. So Jim and I are trying to connect and pass the baton. And I will try to see that through, even though we get back in session August 25th until the end of September. So.
Thanks, Hal. Jim?
So I did attend the most recent Charter Change Commission meeting the day after our last council meeting. The groups had a number of outreach plans and touch points. Most recently, they did a Q&A on town meeting television last week, explaining some of the features of the charter changes being considered and seeking feedback from the public. I've reached out to all the counselors, also asking that we take this opportunity to work together with the Charter Commission members to hear as many community voices and input on this matter around all resident voting and the other charter changes being considered. So I hope that's something that we can all do individually with the people that we do connect with. And the Charter Commission is working as best I can to reach other groups that may be harder to reach as best we can during the times of remote meetings. So that's an effort that's ongoing, and the Charter Commission will be discussing that tomorrow night to update where they are with outreach and engagement. So I think that they're doing a good deal of work, and I'm hoping we can support them however we can to get as many voices into the process as possible. Other than that, that's the only update I have.
Thank you, Jim. Mike?
Sure. Happy Pulse Independence Day, everybody. The Myers household had a medical emergency last Monday, and I wanted to thank the Winooski Police Department, not only as a Winooski City Councilor, but as a resident of Winooski, on their response time to my house. I wanted to thank them for their professional conduct they had and their common demeanor to help the nerves of my family members that were involved. I wanted to thank Chief Hebert publicly for his leadership, for what he does for our essential service of keeping our city safe and strong. And my daughter wanted to be here tonight, but she's not, because she wanted to thank the Winooski PD too, because it had something to do with her. And as I said, the response time was unbelievable until St. Michael's Rescue got here. And I wanted to give them a plug and say thank them for their professional services that they offer our city, and knowing that we're in good hands, seeing them work, you know, it's unbelievable. And the common demeanor that all the professionals had really helped de-escalate the situation that was going on in my household. And again, a big shout out to Winooski Police Department for their conduct, for their professionalism, and a big shout out to Chief Hebert for his leadership of providing great officers that help keep our city safe. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Amy?
I have no report at this time.
Thank you. A couple of items. Since our last meeting, I had a phone call with Colonel Shevchik, the wing commander at the Air Guard. So, as you know, we passed that resolution urging the airport to apply for noise monitoring. The airport did submit that grant application and also reached out to the Guard leadership, asking them to also explore noise monitoring. He shared with me that the Navy is actually doing has a plan starting next year to do real live F-35 noise measurements at 2 different bases in the nation, which they think will validate either way the data that was used in the modeling that we are that our noise map is based on here. I think there's also side conversations still that the airport and the Guard are having, but I did want to share that is one item he shared with me that is potentially some more data that folks could have here next year. And he also shared that 16 of the aircraft are here now, and there are 4 remaining to arrive by end of summer. We had Congressman Peter Welch here with us last week in town, trying to push forward some infrastructure investment legislation in the House of Representatives. It was nice to have him here and highlight some of the great stuff that is happening and what we've been able to do with investment infrastructure, and what more we could do if that legislation goes through and there's more funding available for us and other communities in Vermont. And I think folks have heard in the community that St. Stephen's Church is no longer, I don't know what the right word is. they're no longer having services. There's no longer a priest there, and that parish is joining with St. Francis. So just because I've had some questions in the community, we have spoken with City Manager Baker, and I have spoken with Monsignor McDermott at the, oh my gosh, I'm having a lot of vocabulary issues today.
Diocese?
Yes, the diocese, thank you. And so they're going through a process of moving those assets to St. Francis, merging the parishes. Basically what I wanted to share is there are no imminent plans for that building. They're still going to maintain it and have someone living in the rectory. And, you know, we will see what the future brings there. And finally, have been in touch with our Finance Commission members, and we are going to reconvene that commission starting July 14th. That is the end for me. I will pass it to Jesse for our city updates.
Great, thank you very much. So a couple of updates tonight. Bear with me for a little bit. I want to start, as I have been for the last couple of months now, talking about COVID and specifically the Winooski outbreak. So currently, Winooski Burlington outbreak, I should say. Currently, there are 116 total cases associated with that outbreak. 77 of those are in Winooski. We certainly are seeing a tail off of those cases, so continue to believe that we have our hands around that outbreak and our residents are being tested and following the public health guidance, and our community remains safe. A few more details on that. Of the 116 in the outbreak, so not just in Winooski, but the outbreak as a whole, 65% are adults. The 60% report no symptoms, so the majority of folks are asymptomatic. The majority of cases, the majority of households in which there is a case, there is more than one case. So there are families involved. And then there are an additional 130 contacts associated with those positive tests. And 23 of those contacts have gone on to become cases themselves. So just a continued huge thanks to the Vermont Department of Health, our community partners at USCRI and Association of Africans Living in Vermont. They have done an amazing job supporting our neighbors in our community. And a huge thanks to our neighbors. Over 2,500 people have been tested at the Winooski pop-up sites over the last month, which is a significant portion of our population. And we're just really thankful that people are coming out and taking care of themselves and their neighbors and doing the right thing. So along those lines, testing is going to continue here in Winooski probably for the foreseeable future. The Vermont Department of Health is really committed to ensuring that there are accessible locations to be tested in Winooski on an ongoing basis. So there was testing today at the O'Brien Community Center. They'll be testing tomorrow at OCC as well. You can register. You can also just show up. It's free. You can walk up and be tested. We're seeing about 150, 160 people a day being tested, and VDH can absolutely keep up with that. If folks are needing evening hours, if for whatever reason they can't get there during the day, Burlington is having evening hours this Wednesday and Thursday from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. And those will be at the Champlain Elementary School in Burlington at 800 Pine Street. So that is the COVID outbreak update for Winooski. Moving on to other things. Absentee ballots are here and available. People who got their mail today may have already seen the Secretary of State has sent around postcards to all voters in Winooski, encouraging folks to request absentee ballots. So when you receive that postcard, you can either mail it back or call City Hall directly and request that absentee postcard in advance of the August 11th primary. We also will be having an in-person primary to comply with state legislation. So that will be August 11th, traditional election procedures, 7 to 7 at the Senior Center. Janet and Carol and the BCA have put into place some safety precautions. Masks will be required. The line will be extended, likely outside, so people should be prepared for that. And we'll limit the number of people in the Senior Center to make sure we're in compliance. But we really want to encourage, and we'll be getting more messaging out over the next several weeks to encourage people to request those absentee ballots. Just a reminder, there is also there's the state primary ballot, but there is also a local ballot for school treasurer. So you will see both of those. They need to be voted on and sent in separately in 2 different signed envelopes. There'll be lots of instructions on that in the materials. I want to give you a quick update, a small public works project that we're doing. We are working on repairing and replacing the sidewalk along West Lane. During that work starts on Wednesday. During that period, parking will be prohibited during working hours of 7 a.m. and 4 p.m. Can park overnight, but cars need to be moved in the morning. So just a heads up on that if you get questions. And we have done door hangers to all the residents in that neighborhood so they know that is coming. I want to give you a quick follow-up on the June 23rd flooding event that happened at 16 Abenaki Way. You probably remember that pretty catastrophic event for those residents. So it was a water event, not a fire event. The fire department responded very quickly. We still do have 55 residents who are displaced from that building. It's building C in the at 16 Abenaki Way. The fire alarm systems were taken out, significant electrical system degradation, the elevators taken out. Those things are the things that are really prohibiting people from coming back in at this point. Chief Adi and his team are having weekly Zoom calls with the contractors who are working in that building to try and move, provide lots of assistance as they go through that regulatory process to get that work done as quickly as possible and folks back in their homes. So just want to provide that quick update. The Chittenden County Public Safety Authority, which is the board that is overseeing the potential merger of dispatch, is meeting again this week on Friday morning. We have not met for a number of months because of COVID and related delays. So we are meeting this week to figure out what the potential next steps are given other demands of human resources and given significant budget demands in all of our communities. So more to come on that, just want you to know that that's moving forward. As you probably remember from last meeting, today was the first day of Thrive for the summer, and Ray reports that it went very well. So congratulations to Kate Anderson for really launching a safe and supportive program in the middle of the pandemic. We still do have a few spots available, so if you know of young residents who need something to do during the day, they can call Kate at 233-8188, 233-8188, or go to the city's website to sign up. Want to let you know that Alicia Finley, our Recreation and Parks Manager, has resigned. Her last day with the city was on July 2nd, and we're very thankful for her work over the last 3 years and wish her the best in her future efforts. Along a lot related lines, as you probably remember, Amanda Perry, our library director, left a couple of weeks ago, and we are holding our first round of interviews for that position starting this week. We've gotten a number of great candidates, so we're really excited about that. And while she's not on the call, I wanted to share that Carol has her work anniversary with the city on July 14th. She will be celebrating 40 years working for the city of Winooski. So if you have a moment to give her a call, shoot her a quick email, and just thank her for 4 decades of service to Winooski with a smile and a positive attitude and creative thinking, I would really appreciate it, and I know she would as well. Couple quick, the mayor mentioned this, but a few upcoming, and Jim, upcoming meetings. Charter Commission will be meeting tomorrow, Finance next week, and we also are anticipating that Safe, Healthy, Connected People and Housing will meet in July as well. So we'll do all the public notice about that, but those are all starting back up virtually before our next meeting. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving into our regular items, the first item in our agenda is up for approval. This is a peddler's permit application for Aisha Bassett. Will Janet be introducing
Yeah.
it?
Since Carol couldn't be here tonight, I'll introduce it. Staff has received a peddler's application from Aisha Bassett. She is requesting to sell soft-served ice cream at the corner of West Allen and Main Street. The appropriate staff has seen the application and reviewed it, and they recommend approval.
Thank you. Are there
Welcome.
any questions or concerns from council?
Christina, I think Aisha may actually be on the phone. I'm not
Oh,
sure if that's her
I-
number.
I do see a hand raised.
Yes, it is Aisha.
Hi, thank you so much. I am on the phone.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for your approval. We're really excited. We're so excited.
Do folks have any questions for Aisha while we have her?
What
Really
flavors are you going to be offering?
Chocolate vanilla and the classic maple. Come on down and find out.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions or concerns?
I'm all set.
Any questions from other members of the public? All right, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve this peddler's permit.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Jim, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Welcome, ice cream from Aisha.
Mhm.
Next up, we have another item for approval. These are our commission appointments and reappointments.
So we have talked about this briefly a couple of times, given, as you may remember, all of our commission appointments are lined up to the fiscal year. So they expire at the end of June and reappointments start July 1st. With COVID, and given that many of these commissions were not able to meet over the last couple of months, and we have neighbors who would like to continue to serve, we are recommending that you reappoint the membership currently listed here, both the commissioners and the alternates. All are returning commissioners with one exception. We have a new neighbor, Caitlin Hayes, who is actually on the phone with us tonight. We are recommending she be appointed as an alternate to the Development Review Board. And she met with the mayor and the chair of the DRB and Eric Vorwald last week, I believe, to talk about that appointment. So all of the rest are reappointments with the one new addition of Caitlin.
Yeah, and I just wanted to emphasize, I guess, for the public, we didn't, last year we did a big push to fill out our commissions. They're all pretty much, I think they're all full right now. And it also, for me personally, didn't feel like a good time to do another push to try to bring in new people when we have, as Jesse said, folks that are willing to continue serving. And happy that so many people want to stay on. Does council have any questions or concerns? Again, we do have our one new potential appointee here, if there are questions for Keila. All right. Kaylin, if you would like to say anything, feel free. You also do not have to. Any questions or concerns from the public? Again, you can use the raise hand feature in Zoom or press *9 on the phone. All right, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the commission appointments and reappointments.
So moved.
Motion by Mike, second by Amy. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. Item C, this is a Act 250 amendment application for an art installation at 106 East Allen Street.
Great, thank you. Eric Vorwald is on a much deserved vacation this week and is not in a place where he has internet access. So I will be attempting to carry the water on this for him. Also joining us tonight is Jackie DeJess on Zoom as well. She is the permit applicant and she can answer additional questions. So this permit request was initially a temporary art installation on the City Lights building in the TIF district. It's been very well received by the community. It's on a side of the building that's not interfering with traffic, but creates a new interesting space to be creative and thoughtful in our downtown. The property owner is now interested in making that a permanent installation. And because of that permanency, it does need to go through get the official Act 250 permit. So as you've heard a couple of times in the last couple of months, when those Act 250 permit applications are applied for within the TIF district, the city has to be a co-applicant on it. So what you all are approving tonight is our ability to co-apply for that with Jackie DeJess. They have already gone through all of the local permitting process so that they need nothing else from us but for our signature on that Act 250 application. We included as part of your agenda the images of the art installation that are currently there, as well as the previous Act 250 jurisdictional opinion and the document that I will sign with your approval. And Jackie is here on the phone if you have any questions for her.
Thank you. Happy to see some more public art. Any questions, concerns from council?
I would just add that I think the installation is beautiful and excited that you want to make it permanent.
Thank you for your comments.
Any questions, concerns from members of the public? All right, so hearing no concerns, I would entertain a motion to approve the Act 250 permit amendment application.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Hal, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
Item D, this item is for discussion. Update from VTCBD Labs. So I've received quite a few questions about the VTCBD Labs activity, and Jesse invited a member from that business to join us today, who unfortunately isn't able to. We did receive a statement from them. Is there anything else you want to add, Jesse?
No, just for context, this is the operation that's currently using what was formerly the carpet factory. So it's down on Elm Street.
Yeah, the old warehouse there. So I think council has seen, so they sent us a statement, which council has seen, but I know the public has not, because we just got this today, so it was not included in the agenda. I can read this as much as I hate doing that. Basically, so VTCBD Labs facility is a drying warehouse for all natural hemp products. The drying operations were to initially be in a short window of 3 to 4 months, but due to installation holdups and the pandemic, their production has been pushed back, as many businesses have. As a startup in general, we have taken a huge hit during these times, but we are fighting to complete this crop for our farming partners. Since the pandemic slowing everything down for us, our hemp bales are sitting longer than expected. This odor has nothing to do with equipment or fixing in operations. It is solely due to the fact that we were closed for a period of time and cut back to have production with COVID-19 guidelines being enforced in order to go back to work. Like many, we have been taking the pandemic very seriously, taking all the necessary precautions in order to flatten the curve. With the recent spikes in our community, we have had to slow operations and cut shifts down even further, which sets us back. Unfortunately, this means into the summer months. With increasing temperatures, we recognize that this odor is amplified and sincerely apologize for any inconveniences this may cause. The smell which is being emitted is just the crop's natural odor, like that of any produce in a field during harvest. However, we are working hard to dry this product as fast as possible for the sake of our farmers' crop and the community members in the surrounding neighborhoods. The future of these drying operations will typically operate from October to February as planned. Also, as we have previously shared, no chemicals are used in the drying process of this natural crop. When VT Labs comes out on top of this pandemic, we could potentially grow into more than just a drying facility, which could open up jobs to the Winooski community and additional Vermont residents. We hope you can understand that this is not a normal year for any business, but we look forward to making a home here in Winooski. Again, we sincerely apologize for any community members who are not fond of the hemp odor, and hopefully we are able to be fully operational by 2021. VT Labs will continue to work as fast as we can while keeping the safety of our community in mind during these hard times. Counselors, I don't know if you all have gotten questions on this topic, but that is, we wanted to invite some public comment so members of the public know what is happening and why it sometimes smells like hemp in certain parts of town. Any questions or comments from any of you before I open to the public? If there are any questions or oh, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question because I've been reached to about this situation, and it's a tough one for people that live in that area, because if you buy a house next to a farm, you have to expect the smells from a farm. But when you have a business move into a community that people are already established there and they have a strong order and the people have no real say about this, it's tough for residents and it's tough for the business owners. The question I have, and I wish they were here, are there different operating hours that they could do to try to get this smell not in hours where people are outside or trying to enjoy their backyard? Is there a way to store these bales in some kind of container that will muffle the scent? I know it's not a typical year, but once if they get busier and as we have warmer falls, people's windows are still open during October. Not so much in the end of October, but it's happened in the past. And I'm wondering if there's any alternative for the residents down, such as West Street, Elm Street, Hickox Street, in that area.
Yeah, so I think we can certainly pass along any of these questions and comments that we received this evening and see what responses they have for us.
I'm glad to see that warehouse being used. It's a great facility. It's a huge facility, and I'm glad someone's in there. And I definitely don't want to push the business out, but I'd like to know if there's different hours of operation or if there's ways to contain this smell. Just, it is a pretty strong odor, and if you don't like that smell, I feel for the residents down in that area.
I thought I saw a hand raised from a call-in member.
We have Betty McCure here for public comments. Betty, go ahead. Hi, Betty, we can hear you.
Christine?
Yeah, we can hear you, Betty.
This is Betty Mercure.
Sure, please share your comment.
Well, I am one of the residents who is not happy with the odor coming from the drying plant. I feel that, it's a legitimate business, but it's in an area where you have a lot of residential property. It may be zoned agriculture where they are, but they're just down the street from a huge residential, area I mean, you're talking Winooski 1 square mile, and this area down here encompasses West Street, River Street, Hickok Street, Clifford Street. I mean, you know, this is the whole area. And when they start drying that stuff, they start early in the morning. I'm up at 7:30 and sometimes earlier. And it's already drying in the drying process. And it goes on all day. I just feel that we're paying our share of taxes down here, a good share. And I'd like to be able to enjoy my yard. We're stuck in the house all winter. And then, you know, with the virus, we haven't been able to go places like we normally have in the past. So, you know, my thing is to go sit out in my yard, but that smell is nauseous.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if there was something they could add to their drying process, like scrubbers or, you know, I'm not sure what they would do, but it seems to me that it's not fair to the people in this area. It's not fair at all.
Thanks, Betty. We will certainly add that to the list of questions to share with them after this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
I see another hand raised, Stephen Joanne Plusser. You are free to speak. Steve or Joanne, can you hear me? You may need to.
Do you hear me now?
Oh, yes, now we do, yes.
It's like my cell phone now. My name is Steve Closure. I live down at the bottom of Elm Street at 75. Been here for about 39 years or so. I agree with Betty. The smell has been horrendous this spring. And I am for jobs, new technology. This is all new to the community and that. A few of my concerns, though, is with that business moving in there, one of them being an abutting neighbor to that property and it being along with an Act 250. I'm just curious why we were not notified of a business change of use in that property and hearing their business plan. I heard earlier, as you explained through their letter, that they would be normally doing this drying process in the fall, September, October, November, and kind of put a little blame on the COVID. COVID didn't hit us till March. The hemp that's been going down there on 18-wheelers past my house are from last fall's harvest, not from this spring. Hemp is harvested in the fall. So that would be a concern on how they're really answering their question on how they'll treat this future smell. But again, my bigger concern is why the neighbors abutting that property were not notified of the use, to be invited to a meeting where they just allowed and just leased that space through Redstone. It's been several businesses over several years. There's a lot of trucks, equipment deliveries coming down the imposed truck route that was put into place about 40 years ago. Roads haven't been maintained by city or anybody on repairs due to the trucks, not from normal traffic. The city public works guys do a great job. I commend them immensely, but all in all, just living down here now with this smell, it's just kind of added a little bit more anxiety to, as Betty said, you know, living down here and the taxes we pay in the neighborhood. And I'm not blaming the business. Right now, I'm blaming more of our system and letting neighbors know what's going on before it happens and it gets this far. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. I do want to clarify that the letter shared with us does say there was an installation problem initially with their equipment. That was the initial delay before the pandemic. The pandemic caused further delay. Jesse, I don't know if you can speak to the process of when businesses come and go in the city.
So My understanding, and I think we should probably collect all of these questions and comments tonight and get formal responses back from Vermont CBD and from our zoning administrator to share back at the next council meeting. So off the top of my head, my understanding is that because it is a permitted, agriculture is a permitted use at that site, people have by right the ability to use that site for agricultural purposes. So there was no conditional use required, so it did not need to go through the DRB. I know that's not a satisfying answer, but that is my understanding of the process. But we will have a more formal response to that, citing the zoning for the next meeting.
Jesse. Are there any further public comments? Steve?
My question back is then, if it's an approved agricultural, it's not an approved laboratory. So they are manufacturing, or is it approved manufacturing down there too? That's why I'm just questioning the change of use. What was it before agricultural? I mean, barns and farms are agricultural, and if you go to put a condominium in there or housing project, you got to do a full change of use. So it'd be another, I mean, I understand the zoning board's got to, or the zoning administrator's got to look at our questions. So yes, it may be an agricultural, zoned agricultural, but is this CBD laboratories full agricultural or mixed business, and budding neighbors should have been notified of a change of use? Thank you.
Yeah.
For clarifying.
Steve, that's a great question and a great distinction, and we will look into all of those definitions and make sure that the process was followed, and if it wasn't, we will address that.
Is there any further comment on this item?
I just want to say I'm interested in what comes back from the organization, because it sounds like it's an issue that my committee, government operations, should look into. So I'll be curious to hear what the response is. Thank you.
Thank you, Hal. Mike?
Yeah, since we're gonna start a list of questions, in their drying process, is there filters, special filters that can be put in place to dilute the exhaust from the drying process? Maybe there's some other equipment that they need to look into, and maybe, I don't know, the powers to be need to get on board and try to figure this out. Because Betty's right. You know, during this whole process, some people should be able to enjoy their backyards, and we're hearing it from a couple residents that they're not able to do that right now, and that's a real shame. So maybe let's ask that question about a filter system, and if they may need to upgrade their system. I don't know if it has to go through zoning or whatever process we need to take. I think we owe it to our residents.
And I would just add that I think it's unfortunate that they couldn't join us tonight. I think ideally they would be here to be able to engage in these conversations, and it would be a lot more productive than this back and forth. So I would really like to invite them again to a future meeting when we have more answers from them, and be able to let the public ask them these questions directly.
Yes, absolutely. Is there any further comment from council? All right, we will, as Jesse said, come back with future updates on this and send another invitation. Moving on to item E, we are up for approval to set the FY21 municipal tax rate.
Angela, do you want to take this one? This is your excellent work.
Sure. So annually, the council sets the tax rate based on the grand list that is established by the assessors. So I gave you lots and lots of numbers included in your packet, but what it boils down to is that our non-TIF grand list is $517 million, and it's up quite a bit from the prior year, about 2%, which is much higher than we had anticipated during the budget process. And the calculation breaks down into a tax rate of 1.1459. This is a 1.45% increase, which is much less than the one that we were discussing during the budgeting process. We had estimated that it was going to be 1.1571 or 2.45%. So we're 1% below where we thought we would be during the budgeting process. The impact to the taxpayers for a property valued at $225,000 in the community, this represents a $36.90 increase or $9.23 per quarter.
I think that is really great news, especially at a time like this, when folks' finances are less certain. You know, this is once again less than a cost of living increase on the municipal budget, the municipal tax rate, and I think speaks to the value of having both new residential and commercial growth in our community, that is really helping keep our, you know, our individual tax bills from increasing as much as they could.
Yeah, we saw about a $10 million grand list growth. Most of it was due to the developments on East Allen by DeJess and the property, plant, and equipment at the CBD labs. We do not have the local agreement for you tonight to approve. We will be bringing that to you in August. We do not yet have the education tax rates from the state.
Any questions from council? Public comment on FY21 tax rate? All right, so hearing no questions or concerns, I would take a motion to approve the FY21 municipal tax rate as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Amy, second by Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. And next up, item F, set FY21 tax due dates. Angela again.
So as part of the COVID pandemic, the state of Vermont extended the income tax deadline to July 15th. And as part of that, we are seeing a delay in people filing their homestead tax declarations. We are missing approximately 70% of the homestead declarations across the state of Vermont, including in Winooski, which would result in us having to send a number of revised tax bills if we were to send out bills on our regular schedule. First, we don't have the tax bill paper to do revised tax bills for that many properties. And it does cause a lot of confusion, particularly for people who have escrowed taxes, where the mortgage company continues to pay us the original bill amount instead of a revised bill amount. There does cause a lot of confusion there. So what we are proposing with alignment with Act 102 signed by the governor is a delay in the first due date for taxes. Instead of being due on August 15th, we are proposing September 7th for the first due date, which would allow us to send out tax bills on August 7th, that first Friday in August. So once we have the local agreement rate set by council that Monday, we can print bills and get them out to the taxpayers.
Do you have any, what have staff thought about a need to like proactively tell people your bill's not coming on time?
So this is not the first time we've had a delayed tax bill.
Okay.
And what we've done in the past is included in the utility bill, which is set to go out on the normal schedule, a stuffer that says, notice your tax bill will be mailed to you on a date certain, and specify that date within that notice.
I think we would use all of our normal channels anyway, and traditionally people don't pay until they have that stub because the amount does change every year. So I think that it's not that we would have kind of miss payments before the tax bills went out. I do want to add just one more sentence, if I can, to Angela's great background. While I think that this is absolutely the right thing to do for the residents in terms of preventing confusion and being clear in what we're putting out to folks, it does create quite a cash flow challenge for us because we rely on those first installment of property taxes to make payroll, to do capital projects during the summer, to pay the school the first installment that is owed to them. So we are tracking that very carefully, and part of this recommendation is the analysis Angela has done to demonstrate how we can meet our cash flow needs until early September with that month delay of payment. But it is not an easy feat, and I will say that most of our team is feeling a little bit of hardship as they kind of think about staggering purchases throughout the year to ensure to not make them this quarter in order to make that cash flow projection.
Thank you for calling that out, Jesse. I think that is important to keep in mind that this really does impact us and our operations, and that there's been a lot of work by the staff, by all of our staff, to keep dealing with the ever-changing pandemic response. And we will likely, continue having to make adjustments. Any other questions or concerns from council?
I have one question. Is this going to be the new norm for tax collection, or because it seems like it's going to get squished, and sooner or later there's going to be a time period where the people that budget their money may not be able to afford the next payment of taxes if there's only a month or 2 months between instead of the quarterly. Is there any conversation going anywhere about helping people out if they get their taxes paid on like September 15th that we're proposing, after they can't make their next tax payment in November because they don't have enough time to budget their money? Is there any conversation going on for that?
So I am really hoping this is not the new normal. This is really a one-time decision based on the deferral of the state income tax filing date as a result of COVID. Angela, do you want to talk just a couple of sentences about the interest and penalties throughout the year and how they're different at different times? Because that kind of gets to what Mike is saying.
Yeah, so if somebody misses an installment, they're not hit with that 8% penalty every quarter. So if you were to miss paying this first installment by a week, the penalty, the interest is 1% on your tax installment. So it doesn't exponentially increase. It's 1% per month for the first 3 months and 1.5% per month thereafter. And then if it's unpaid in the May installment, that's when the 8% penalty is charged.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the public? I'm hearing no other comment. I would entertain a motion to approve the FY21 tax due dates as proposed.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Amy, I didn't hear you.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item G, 2020 policy priorities and strategies recovery plan.
Great, thank you. So I'll kick this off, and but this document really comes from the full leadership team. So if you have questions for others. Many of them are on the phone as well. So as you know, annually for the last bunch of years, we have come together to set a shared annual work plan. That plan really focuses on strategic initiatives and new work, and not on just the ongoing core governmental services of the city. So at your May 18th meeting, we talked about, given the COVID response and given the unknowns we're going to face in the next couple of months, we proposed providing you with essentially a 2020 plan, a shorter term plan that outlined those strategic efforts this year to allow us time to come back towards the end of the year and reconvene and reassess what our shared goals were. At your June 1st council meeting, you talked about how the perception that this recovery plan really didn't do a good job telling the story of how we were supporting our neighbors through the pandemic and as we came out of the pandemic. So leadership team took that back and have built into this proposal the things that we believe we have continued to do throughout the pandemic to support our neighbors, to provide them access to services and information throughout the pandemic, and to give them the tools and the resources they need as we grow out of it. We wanted to caveat that with, those are primarily things that we perceive as core government functions that we are doing, all day, that they're not necessarily strategic. They are things that the residents should always expect from us. So we have called them out in this report, but we've marked those particular items with an asterisk to demonstrate that they are those core government services that we will continue to provide. The other items in red are the new things that we're adding to this plan, either as a result of the COVID response or new priorities that have come up. And then what's in the black text is the priorities we are continuing to work on that you all set with us last year that are ongoing. So that is what's before you. Again, happy to answer any questions about this. I hope that we have heard your concern about the story this document is telling about what we're doing to support residents and businesses and your priorities.
Thank you, Jesse. Do you folks have, I think I would ask to that, the bigger question here is, does this address our concerns and meet our priorities in the shorter term? But maybe before that, does anyone have questions about any particular items in the list?
I just want to acknowledge the amount of work that's listed here. I think it's so impressive, especially considering how small the staff is in general and some of the reductions that have had to taken place this year. So I just want to take the moment to sing your praises and say thank you for everything that you're doing for our city. I think a lot of this work tends to be invisible to our community, but it's so important, and especially the steps you're taking with COVID right now to protect all of us. It's really important, and I look forward to being able to lift up some of this to the public.
You, Amy.
I just wanted to add on to that too. Like, I think something that is easy to miss is just that even continuing essential services and basic work right now that, is maybe seems routine, is not. It takes more time and more energy and capacity because we are responding to changing situations. So I think even everything that's on here is even maybe a little bit more effort than one might have thought last year when we were looking at this. Did we just lose Mike?
I think we did.
I think so. I did have a couple of specific questions. I noticed the Meals on Wheels expansion in here, and I don't think that's something that we've talked about publicly, that there was an expansion of that service. Just wonder if we could share that out.
Yeah, so we, since the beginning of the COVID kind of quarantine and pandemic response, we've seen a significant increase in the number of Winooski residents that we're serving through Meals on Wheels. So we've actually more than doubled our number of meals that we're serving. I believe we're up to about 80 a day between the inside routes that go to the housing authority buildings and then our outside route, which goes to private residences. So Barb and Olivia have been really carrying a ton of the weight there. They're doing great work. And we've had a number of volunteers that have stuck with us throughout this and have continued to deliver meals. I had to give Roberto a shout out because I see him like every time he's delivering, I feel like out in his car driving around with his mask on, waving, all happy about it. But it's been really great to see a lot of our core volunteers there stick with us despite, you know, the concerns and the risks there. So yeah, it's a lot these days to process the meals in the morning, but they're doing a great job.
Thank you, Ray. I also wanted to ask about the community outreach team. So before I really got involved with the city, I didn't know that we had this service. And I think maybe a lot of members of the public also aren't aware that we, you know, that we have this outreach team that is working in partnership with our police department. I know we don't have the chief here. Jesse, do you want to share a little bit about that?
Sure. So the community outreach team was an initiative we started probably now about 2.5 years ago. At that point, we, across our shared communities, were really seeing an increase in suicides. And of course, nationwide, police are seeing an increase in mental health calls and an awareness that often they're not the ones who are best suited to intervene in crisis situations, and folks with more case management, social work, de-escalation abilities are better suited to intervene. So in partnership with the city managers and chiefs in our surrounding communities, we approached Howard Mental Health and asked them about the potential of using the street outreach team, which is in Burlington and specifically targeted for Church Street, and expanding that model to the communities surrounding Burlington. So we have set up that program, and you allocate funding every year out of the police budget to that program. What it specifically is 5 mental health trained Howard Center staff, community outreach staff, who are deployed on a daily basis to our communities to respond either with public safety officers or instead of public safety officers as dispatch calls come in, and ensure that our residents are best served by mental health services, housing services, food security services, medical services across the board are as connected as possible. They also do proactive outreach. So we have neighbors in our community who often experience crisis and are known to many residents. And instead of waiting for that 911 call of need to come in, the community outreach team will proactively reach out to them on agreed to schedule, check in, make sure they have what they need, they're connected to their services, essentially be that moment of need call. So it's been a great program for us. I think across the board, we hear from the police department, from the Winooski Police Department, as well as the other communities, that they are really seen as partners in our public safety work. And I know if Chief Hebert were here, he would also emphasize with me that there's a really interesting byproduct, an unintended byproduct that's come out of the community outreach team partnership, which is they are really providing not only direct service to our residents, but are doing point in time active support for our first responders as well. So thinking about how the police officers are watching the community outreach team members and how they de-escalate and the services they provide gives them new tools in their toolbox to respond. It's also a mental health professional with them in those worst moments that they see of, suicide or overdose or things like that. It's another mental health professional in their network as well to say, wow, that was a really hard day. How are you doing? What do you need? Are you, do you have somebody to talk to? Just check in with them. So it's not only that mental health service to our residents, but it's also improving our staff and our professionals and how they deliver the service as well.
Thanks for describing that. Are there any other questions from council on specific items or things you want to hear more about? Any questions from the public? All right, so to the larger point of do we want to approve this? Does this meet our goals for our current short-term priorities? Jim.
This wasn't a question, but I did want to echo what was said before. As we talked about the last meeting, the opportunity for this to be a marketing tool, it is an impressive list, and I appreciate the extra time it takes to compile things you already are doing as the course of business that really do support our residents. So thank you for doing that. And I think we'll have a discussion later in the agenda around the housing issue. That's the only place where I wonder if we need some additional work, but I think we can keep those separate at this point and discuss that issue around housing stability later, but leave this document as is. To me, seems like a lot of time has already gone into this, and I think it'd be good to split those, although I was looking to other counselors or Jesse or Heather to see what you think about that.
I think we can go either way on that. I don't know what's going to come out of that conversation later on. So I think if there are significant changes, I think it might be worth, you could table this conversation for now and pick it back up at the end of the meeting. We could put this back on an agenda in the future. I think what's here is what we are currently doing and priorities we have currently heard. If those priorities change, they change, and we can move and adjust.
And also, my response is we can also put things specifically on the Housing Commission work plan if that's a good place for them too. So I think we have a bunch of different options.
I would support that approach, given that we do want our commissions to be guided by this document. And so that's where things can get more specific, I think. And to Jesse's point, we can always update as priorities shift.
So would that be tabling a vote of approval until the end of the meeting to see if there is a shift that then has to go to the Housing Commission? Is that what I was hearing?
No, not for me. So what I was saying, approving this as is, and when we get our housing goal update and then talk about the stable housing memo, letting that drive the work plan for the Housing Commission.
That sounds fine to me.
Folks have other thoughts?
I think that's fine.
Do I have a motion to approve the 2020 policy priorities and strategies recovery plan?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Jim, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, staff, for coming back with this. The next item on the agenda, H, is for approval, HK Central Block Limited Partnership. Request for affiliates of Hall Keene to replace the limited partners in the HK Central Block Limited Partnership. Jesse.
Okay, I'm gonna get real wonky on you for a few minutes and apologize in advance. So per the charter, you have sole authority to change any kind of real estate ownership or property ownership, which is why we are bringing this to you. We believe we need authorization from you to execute this consent certificate. So that's the legal ability you have. So as you know, Keene's Crossing, which is the kind of large complex within the center of the TIF district downtown, downtown, is 6 separate condominiums, 213 apartment units, and almost 5,000 square feet of office space. It was developed by Hall Keene out of Massachusetts when the TIF district first was started. Low income tax credits were used to develop that affordable housing project. Now that the timeline has expired for those low-income tax credits, they've been fully utilized. The majority owner is looking to divest from the project, and Hall Keen, as the management association and the continued developer on the project, they were here from day one, want to increase their ownership and stay connected to the Winooski community. So what is being asked for, because of how the legal documents of that initial development were set up, the city keeps control and has to give consent if there are ownership changes within the property. So what you are authorizing is saying, yes, this is fine to change who those investors and owners are in the property. And the most important aspect for us is that in the transfer certificate, it requires acknowledgement that all of the expectations around affordable housing, the debt that's currently on the building are maintained. So nothing is changed by how the building operates. It continues even under the new ownership structure. Our city attorney has reviewed both of these agreements and actually made quite substantial changes to ensure that those classifications remained. So what is before you today is our recommendation of, approval of that ownership change. We are fine with that, especially given that it is staying within the management company and within folks that have been involved in our TIF district from the beginning. And we are reassured that during the transfer of that equity ownership, that the characteristics of the development are maintained in the community's vision. Really wonky. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for clarifying that piece at the end. I won't speak for others, but that was the number one question: is how is this going to impact the residents? Is this going to change the affordability? So happy to hear that has been addressed. Are there other questions from questions or concerns from council? It does not appear we have any members of the public present at this time. So hearing no concerns, I would entertain a motion to approve HK Central Block Limited Partnership request.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Jim, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. On to item I, our housing goal update with Heather.
Thank you. So I've provided you with a document, which is, I would say, not much of an update because the Housing Commission last met in February. In addition to that, one of the major pieces of work that was to be done is to establish an MOU with Opportunities Credit Union and kind of go through the process and the policies to ensure that aligned with OCU so that we could get that rolled out. However, the person that I would be working with at OCU is the same person that I worked with to do the small business loan adjustment and also has been very much involved in the PPP program and so has been inundated and not necessarily available to go through establishing a whole new program. So it is my intention to reinitiate that conversation with him this month. And also I've reached out to the Housing Commission one by one to see how many people are able to meet again. And as Jesse had mentioned, it's my intention to reconvene the Housing Commission starting with the July meeting, which will be July 27th. We do have one person who is a member of the commission who absolutely will not be able to meet until September due to COVID-19. And I think it's unsurprising that the superintendent of schools is very much engaged in trying to deal with COVID-19. So I think I will keep him up to date, keep him on the commission, and go ahead with starting our conversations again and really getting back into our work plan. So I'm happy to take any questions you have about the document that I gave you, but I don't know that there was a ton of new information there.
Thank you, Heather. I appreciate the context on where the Housing Trust Fund is at in taking that to the next step. Are there other questions on this update from council? So I just want to again acknowledge that, like, there's a global pandemic. We cannot expect everything to stay on track or business as usual to continue. And, you know, we are going to continue to unfortunately see things that we think are a priority not get done as fast as we wanted them to, because there are just many new challenges happening right now. And which is a good thing that we're having discussions about what we think is priority right now, trying to balance that out. There are no members of the public present still. If there aren't any questions for Heather on this, we can move to our next item, which is somewhat related. All right.
Thank you.
So let's move on to item J. This is a memo that Jim drafted for us. So I will, Jim, let you speak to this.
Sure, and thank you for adding it to the agenda tonight. So this memo, this is my effort to summarize kind of a couple different lines of conversation that I've been having around housing stability and kind of the status of evictions and rental support, and just trying to understand what we do know, what we might want to know in Winooski as we kind of head towards a new stage in the pandemic. So as the memo outlines, there's been a number of actions that have already been taken to provide relief to homeowners and renters around evictions and foreclosures. And those have supported many of our residents to avoid experiencing homelessness or displacement during the pandemic. Most of those are tied to the emergency order that the governor is maintaining. And when that order ends, the biggest challenge we have is that foreclosures and evictions are still very possible, and none of the back rent and mortgage payments are forgiven right now. So we have this potential for a cliff in our community across the country. And some areas are seeing some concern already in that. My concern is just understanding what we might be facing here in the community, what we might be seeing our community members who are homeowners, who are landlords, who are renters facing when they are faced with back rent due, and some funding from the state to make up that difference. My question is, with our higher proportion of cost burden renters and cost burdened homeowners, the makeup of the plan, the total amount of funding available, are we going to be seeing enough support in our community? And what do we do right now to connect renters and landlords to these programs and to understand their options? So the memo, I think, tries to lay out those concerns. And then thanks to the mayor's input and others, there's some potential actions that we could consider for direction to staff. The first one around data gathering is probably the most time intensive, of actually doing records requests and compiling new information that doesn't currently exist around how many evictions have already been filed in our community and are just awaiting the resumption of court action, how many foreclosures have been filed. We don't know the answers to those questions. The second item around beginning to look at our available sources of funding. So we do have two sources of funding that are really tied to structure improvement and housing stock maintenance. But are there any limits or restrictions that we need to consider if there is a need to tap into local funds for supporting residents to stay housed? And then the third is what was discussed before, asking the Housing Commission to compile information on local conditions and needs and how those might align with our Housing Trust Fund program. And a fourth option, including a note of translation to residents in the next bill about how they can access support if they're having trouble paying mortgage or rent. So those are some options that were thrown out to consider. I know that staff is already stretched thin, and this doesn't appear in our policy and priorities for recovery. But I think that in looking at our schedule and how things could unfold with unemployment benefits going to decrease as the bump from the federal government ends, the appropriation of $25 million from the state, which was estimated to service 15% of rental units across the state, and that's for 3 months of rent. There are some requirements in there that will make it hard for people who are overhoused or cost burdened to stay in their houses if they take advantage of those funds. I think there's just some potential for holes, and with our schedule in the next 2 months, basically having 2 meetings before this could come into effect, I'm interested to hear what other counselors have been hearing, what they think about whether any of these actions are needed at this time to start understanding what the situation is in our community.
Thanks, Jim. Hal?
Yeah, so I just want to offer a glimmer of hope. We got, I think, $1.2 billion from the feds to deal with COVID relief efforts, and the state will be monitoring how that money is going to be spent, because we have until December 30th. If we don't spend it down, we have to return it to the federal government. So we still have the ability to move funds around if things are not being spent down and there's more need, say with rent relief, then there's that possibility down the road that there could be additional funds. But that's speculative, but it's a possibility. And I know the state, we're waiting to reconvene the legislature in late August, because we want to hear if there are any other adjustments from the federal government that we need to consider in order to finish our budget process. So there's still some flux that's going on, but it's hard to pin it down. But we'll know a lot better in another month or so.
Thanks for that context, Hal. I will share that, having spoken with Jim about this in advance and thinking about this, we are really looking, as we've discussed before, really looking to federal and state resources to provide a lot of supports that folks are needing right now. And I think we absolutely, that is what we should be leaning towards. I think to Jim's point, should that fall short, what will we do? When I think about this, these ideas, for me, I think the last suggestion about having some information included with the utility bill is we should really do that, especially if we're talking about the tax bill date changing as well. I think having our housing commission look at potentially at how our housing trust fund can work with or in support of the state program makes a lot of sense. I feel like for the first 2 items, the data tracking and trying to get more clarity on the limits on our funds could be slightly less pressing. Like, I wouldn't say we need this information by August, given what Hal has shared about us potentially having a better understanding in August of where things are at with state funding. Jesse.
I want to let the council have this discussion, but in our staff discussions about this agenda item, I was reminded about some of our current services from Chief Adi, who serves as our town health officer, and often who often is the professional on staff who is working with folks who are going through eviction. So at some point in this conversation, I'd love to give him a few minutes just to share what is being done through that process, because I think it is not statistically significant or other systems data, but it does tell a story about what is currently happening in the city. So after the council has had their conversation, I'd like to give him a few minutes.
I actually think it would be helpful to hear from Chief Adi. I didn't know that we had any insight into potential evictions or those processes here. So it would be helpful, I think, to hear about that.
Yeah, so thanks for asking me to speak to this. This is part of my job that I feel is very special here in Winooski, is how connected we actually are to the residents, tenants, and the landlords. We know a very large, many, we know a lot of insight of what's happening with the landlords as far as their financial position, their ability to meet codes, their difficulties dealing with the tenants. And then we get calls, a lot of calls from the tenants that are getting evicted or in the process of getting evicted. And, that's when we dig in and really feel that we can offer a lot of these pieces of figuring out where the tenant or where the landlord is and circle them with all of our partners, where, the public housing agencies, the state agencies, whatever, we are way out of the box a lot of times and just trying to get them, whether it's just kind of the footing they need to kind of mediate what's going on, or where they can go get a financial assistance, where they can get legal, where they can get public health. We surround them with all of that. And many times I find a lot of those partners have a lot of that data that you're talking about. They don't share it as a pool. How many evictions are going on, but a lot of times when it gets to us, many of our partners already know this is going on, and it's a matter of us just really unifying the efforts and helping the resident, or in many cases the landlord. And we are extremely, extremely successful in positive outcomes. They may part ways, but not very often. In fact, I can't remember only but a couple of cases where the people end up, homeless, but in a very dire position. Usually, we're able to mitigate it and help them work together and get through whatever that situation is. So, I have not heard a lot of instability locally. We continue to hear from landlords and tenants. Obviously, there's no eviction order, but we continue to hear health issues. Again, but I have not heard a lot of instability. We're seeing some of the landlords property owners continue to reinvest in their properties. That's evident through some of the building permits that are coming in. So I don't feel there's a lot of instability right now. And I think, I think the uptick in the COVID locally, I think is another great example of this staff under your direction, but this staff's commitment to the residents of Winooski and understanding that there's just tons and tons of resources that we can go get for these people. And that's the support we need, is to be able to continue to do that. It's super important. The food insecurities, the public health pieces. It was amazing to be on some of those huddles and understand how many pieces we were all able to, that everyone was able to bring and help people through a very tough time. And I don't think that's just in COVID. I think that is in housing insecurities and how stable our community is.
Thanks for sharing that. Chief, do you think it is, I think to the concept of wanting to have data on local evictions filings, which we don't have direct access to as a city, do you think that that's information that you would be, like, in your current role, would you be able to share with us if you hear an uptick? Do you think it would be appropriate to ask landlords to let us know, if they're having to do more, or they're seeing more instability?
So again, I think that's a great resource that we can put in our toolbox, right? And I not that we don't today, but I think it is during this time. I think we highlight that, right? That this council has had this very specific conversation, and for those that are experiencing this, that we can yet tell them another resource to reach out to one of the counselors, and view it as a resource. Don't view it as there's lots of pieces that are gonna be part of why they're in the position they're in, but I feel that it would be a great resource to be able to tell someone, hey, whether they're a tenant, whether they're, the landlord, I think it's super important that we can tell them that you care and that you want to hear what's going on and make sure that you bring what resources you can.
Helen, did you hand up, or is that from before?
That's from before. Sorry about that.
Okay. Amy, were you? Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
I want to just call out that I think there is a real intersectionality here between housing security, race, and poverty that we also need to be thinking about. And I think that without data and without tracking, we're really not going to have any sense of, people of color and our most vulnerable citizens getting hit harder. Nationwide, we know that evictions tend to happen to people of color more, particularly to Black women. And I think that we need some sort of mechanism, or we need to be thinking about how we can tap into that data to keep an eye on that and think about what we can do to be advocates for those folks and point them to resources before it gets to that point. And beyond evictions, if you think about getting to that point of maybe you're not able to pay your rent, there's going to be other things that come before that, right? Like maybe someone is choosing between buying food for their family or paying their water bill for the month or paying their electric bill or whatever it is. And I think some of those vital utilities could get shut off before someone even gets to the eviction process, which during a pandemic is going to be, detrimental to that person, their ability to stay safe and healthy, washing your hands. We're in summer now, but this pandemic is expected to last several more months. We'll be into the heating season before we know it. I think that we need to think even more broadly about some of these smaller impacts that are going to impact someone's life before they get to the eviction process. And I don't know which one of these proposals would best get at that. I recognize that data tracking is probably the most labor intensive for our staff. So maybe that this is something that the Housing Commission could think about. But I just wanted to name some of that and get it on the table.
Jim?
And I think that kind of speaks. So my concern is not so much a retrospective that things are already in motion that we aren't totally aware of, but that we are about to enter a time in which evictions could become easy, or people could end up becoming unstable because we have decreases in unemployment benefits, because people have stretched savings across bills and they're now making choices about what not to pay. And I think the need is out there nationally, and we know that this is already happening. Houston set up a $15 million fund, and it was allocated in 90 minutes to support renters. And there's other counties who are establishing additional funds in second rounds. So I think the 25 million that we have in the pipes for Vermont is great, but we don't even know if in our community, where we are so much more cost burdened than our neighbors in other Chittenden County communities, I really worry that this is something that's going to begin to emerge in the next 2 to 3 months, and that's more the issue that I see. And so the data gathering exercise is more of a surveillance for this issue, so that we can pair it with anecdotal information from landlords and systemic gathering from landlords, like you've been talking about, Chief Audie. I think that there's a number of ways to just start to look for early warning signs, but that's my biggest concern, is that I would hate to be trying to chase this problem 1 to 2 to 3 months down the line after we have households disrupted or having to rehouse to different locations and kind of disrupting our social fabric here in Winooski.
So I do just want to highlight that, like, all very valid concerns. Our role right now, and has been primarily, to make sure people are aware of and able to connect with resources that do not come from us necessarily, right? Like most support is going to come from federal and state sources. And I think what's reflected in our policy priorities and strategies is more of that, making sure we are getting information out there and we are connecting people to what will help them. That I think having that focus on like communications, having the Housing Commission potentially monitor what's happening locally. I'm not exactly sure how to do that. I think having staff spend a bunch of time, and maybe Heather could speak to what this would actually look like. It doesn't sound to me like eviction, foreclosure, unemployment data is readily available to us. I think having staff spend a ton of time on that data collection may not be as valuable as spending a lot of time trying to do outreach and connect people to the resources that are there. I do want to like know if something is changing, if we are seeing a shift. That is my feeling about that concept. I think understanding the limits or the sort of the restrictions on our housing trust fund and community development fund are useful in more of a preparatory manner for, you know, should there be this future date where we are not able to get folks what they need through the state funding. Heather, do you want to talk about what data collection would look like?
If I can talk about a couple of things, I have done research into the Housing Trust Fund. I think what we need to do is understand if we are doing this data collection, what are we using it for and what is the ultimate outcome? Because it is very time intensive and labor intensive and would certainly take some other things off my plate. I would have to maybe not apply for a certain grant or something like that in order to have the time to do that. But that's worth it if we have the resources to be able to provide relief and support to our communities. So I've looked at our Housing Trust Fund back into the grant documents and the requirements, and those funds can be used for property acquisition, construction, code enforcement, rehabilitation, ADA improvements. So these are all not loans to tenants. They're all very specific to the housing units themselves. But I know that there have been some changes made to CDBG requirements recently. However, with the state using CDBG funds to do the CARES Act rent relief program, I think it would be considered duplication of benefit through the same funding source if we used our funds to provide an additional rent relief or foreclosure relief on that. That's based on my very preliminary research, but that's the sense that I'm getting looking through that. With that being said, the CDC funds that have been discussed, I think could be repurposed. We have currently used them as part of the modeling for how we will pay for the Abenaki garage. So there's that to consider, you know, because we'd be robbing from one place and would have to find funds for that. But I also think it's important to understand that if we were to set up some sort of program to be able to provide relief to renters and to potentially to homeowners facing foreclosure, we have a department of one, which is me. And I looked at, you know, nationally what the rates are. And right now, as of the end of May, the rate of non-payment of rent was 25% of renter households had not paid rent. For us, that would be 495 households. So if I were to establish a program and then process 495 applications at my current hours, which is 6 hours per week on housing, that's how my time breaks out. That would take me until December of 2021 at 45 minutes per application to process that. But if we were to reallocate my time and make it 40 hours a week that I just process this, then I would have them done by November. So the question becomes, do we want to look at, there are a bunch of different ways that we can address this. Do we want to look at, you know, seeking grants so that there's more available funding, seeking grants so that we can hire someone who specifically only looks at housing? You know, there are a bunch of different ways to do it. I do think communication is a huge part of it. I think connecting to the structures in place to be able to assist people is a huge part of it. But by the same token, it's also very much about supporting the economic outcomes of our community, to be working on some of the projects that we're working on that will end up impacting tax rates, for example. So I think it's a pretty complex issue. I think there are ways that we can go forward with this, but before doing a very time-intensive analysis of data that is not aggregated anywhere, what would we do with that data if we were to have it? I mean, it would make us feel that we had more of a handle on what was going on, but how would we utilize it?
Okay. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Okay, I had some issues with some cats running around. They disconnected me from power. Anyway, is it worth looking into the Housing Commission to maybe making a subcommittee of some property managers or some of the bigger landlords of our community, along with some homeowners, to try to devise what their expectations are and maybe communicate to the city on how we can help them make a guide or get them the tools they need? Because I don't think any landlord or property manager wants to evict anybody when people are on tough times. But I think if the communication gets started from the top and works itself down, that could be a good source. And I don't know if there's any interest in a subcommittee on the Housing Commission to get some homeowners and some big landowners or landlords together to try to come up with some guidelines on this.
I mean, I could see the Housing Commission doing that work as its sole. I mean, that could be their sole charge at this point. And I think that the representation, we might need to think about how we can still have our school community represented well. So I don't know if there's an opportunity to ask whether Superintendent McMahon can designate someone to serve to kind of represent community needs if they're hearing from the school-aged community. But I could see, I don't think that the Housing Trust or the Housing Commission work plan was extremely intense when we had to pause. And so I think this could be a gear shift for them, or a shift of focus for them. And I see Heather nodding, so I'm taking that as a good sign that that she kind of sees that as a potential too. So I don't know if we need a subcommittee or if we just task the Housing Commission to be the anecdote and data gatherer, or the integrator of this information, work with Chief Hottie, work with others to gather as many stories and information as we can without going through the time-consuming data collection.
Right. That's okay, Jim. That's a good point. And then maybe reaching out to some of the bigger landlords or property managers that take care of some of the bigger properties. Maybe get their input and what their feeling is. Is there communication going on with the tenants and the landlords? And then we step back to some homeowners, maybe just invite some people to some of these meetings, like just send them an email or reach out to certain individuals to get some more data.
Hal?
Oh, thank you, Mayor. This is for Heather, and you may be aware of this, Heather. I serve on the board of the Vermont Community Foundation, and we just stood up a $6 million+ fund for COVID relief. And it just sounds like if we want to collect this data, maybe there's a short-term position that could be funded by Vermont Community Foundation COVID Fund to get us that baseline data. So it's just a thought, but in terms of additional resources, I think that's a possibility.
Thank you so much, Hal. I think that's absolutely a wonderful idea. And I also think that combining efforts on something like that with some of the things that Amy stated about people of color being disproportionately impacted by that, I think that we're really leveraging resources, bringing in Vermont Community Foundation, and it pushes forward our equity work with the Working Communities Challenge as well. So I think that is a beautiful idea. I love that idea.
I will say I also liked what Jim and Mike were talking about, leveraging the existing Housing Commission to do some of that like outreach of what are you, as renter, homeowner, property owner, all the various roles, what are you hearing? What needs are not met? What do you like? what communication are you not getting to really, I guess to your point, Heather, understand what it is that we need to solve for proactively.
Can I say, hey, Jim, this is a great thing that you're doing, I think, too, trying to get ahead of the curve before it starts too. You know, when we got this, when you start sending everything out to everybody, I think it's very warranted now. And that by the conversation that we're having here, I think the communication is key to start reaching out to people. And, you know, good job, Jim.
Well, thanks, Mike, but I'm really drawing on a lot of time, a lot of Jesse and Heather's and Christine's time. So I definitely want to make sure that they're acknowledged. And then John just hit it out of the park with a whole bunch of additional information I didn't take into account. So thank you, Chief Audie. And I think I would love to say that, like, at the end of this, we find out that we don't have anything to worry about and state and federal actions have it covered. Like, that's my hope. But I think I worry that we would, in 3 months, see some parallels that we saw with our outbreak, where it turns out the communication we thought was working wasn't working, and we need to be reaching residents in a different way. And so I'm hoping that this is just us doing a little bit of work. I shouldn't say a little bit of work, doing work that will yield some understanding, like, about what communication is working, what isn't, and how we can adjust and do it better. And this team has already done so much on doing better on communication for the state, for our community. I think that the work that's been done in the last 2 months is indicative of how much it could do. And I'm hoping that this becomes a non-issue. But if we're looking now for the next 2 months, I think we can get a good sense if we're in for trouble or not.
Jim, that's a good connection there with the pandemic outreach. Jesse or Ray, I don't know if you can answer this or not. Like, is this something the multilingual task force has done any work around? You know, I know they've been putting out the health department information, but has there been work to put out information about these additional, like, housing and food resources beyond people who, you know, we know there was direct outreach to folks in the outbreak, but in a big broader scope?
So sorry, Ray, go ahead.
No, it's fine. Yeah, we have not dealt with the housing issue and, like, connecting folks to resources through the multilingual task force as a full group. I know a lot of entities within that group have been doing case management work with their clients. So AALV, I know, has done a lot of work directly with clients that they're serving, but we as a group haven't addressed the issue in terms of translating materials or sort of providing further guidance for folks. And I don't, sorry, I was half on that conversation. So if I did not answer that correctly, let me know.
No, that's what I was asking. I'm just wondering, I don't know their scope. I'm wondering if that's a suggestion we want to make, is that this group also focuses on connecting people to these supports that also support their health.
Yeah.
So can I jump in here? Sorry,
yes.
I think we need to be really careful about, one, I think we've done as a community an amazing job at not placing blame over the last months, and I want to stay away from that. Having said that, a lot of the work that we have hustled to put together in the last couple of months is work to work around failures of other systems. And we can keep recreating wheels on our little local basis, or we can invest in the structures at the state level and different state agencies to ensure that those failures don't happen in the future. So I think it's, you know, the multilingual task force was really set up as a workaround to a need not being met at the state level. And and I agree with Ray, I don't think they've been focused on housing, although I do think all of our community partners have been very focused on housing. And we've heard that periodically through the briefings where Thato and Deke are, you know, talking about specific cases on the side and who's connected to what resources and who has what subsidy and et cetera. But I think one of the things we, you know, Ray and Chief Audie and Paul and I have been advocating for with the health department and the Agency of Human Services through the COVID response is they have gone all in bringing resources to our community, but that can't stop just with health. That has to be expanded into AHS as a whole into the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, that we need to use this example to improve statewide systems, because there are lots of Vermonters in lots of different demographics who are not being well served for a variety of reasons. And the more we can advocate through the after action conversations we're having with the health department about those system changes, the more we're going to see that real systems change at the state level to put out information in more culturally appropriate ways and with more community partners who have the relationships already. So Christine, to directly answer your question, no, I don't think the task force has done it. I also don't think it should be our recommendation that they do it. I think they are filling a problem within a larger structure. Sorry for that soapbox for a minute.
So I think I've heard potentially two avenues here. One is to leverage the Housing Commission to do some learning of what our landscape is. The other is to investigate some dedicated capacity through, I've already forgotten, potential grant funding from
Vermont Community Foundation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are those, if those are avenues we are interested in having staff pursue, is that viable, Heather, or do you need something to come off to even make room for those two ideas?
Heather's the grant queen. What do you mean?
Happy to do it. I'm going to have to work a little bit with Jesse about shifting timelines, but I think that I can do that. Yes.
Because I've seen what's on your plate, and to Hal's point, like, you are working on a lot of incredibly important grants for us. You know, the Working Communities Challenge grant, some funding for the Abenaki Garage, like, a lot of this stuff is very important to our long-term outlook and some of these long-term goals around economic development in Winooski and building equity in Winooski. So I do want to be careful about adding new stuff to your plate and not addressing that. I guess after you have a conversation with Jesse, please tell me if it is not enough capacity and we need to revisit this discussion, and the council needs to say, get rid of something.
Well,
thank you very much. I will do that. And also I'm going to ask for help from the Housing Commission. I'm going to assign roles and delegate some of this so that it's not me doing it and bringing it to the Housing Commission. I really am going to ask for help there.
Jesse, did you have something to add?
No.
Are we as a council saying this is how we would like to move forward? Is there more to discuss here? Are there more questions, concerns?
Can I ask just one question? I wasn't sure where we landed on the idea of a stuffer with the utility bills in relation to this. Is that something that we think is not useful at this point? Kind of to the point that there hasn't really been a lot of discussion yet, so it may not be an issue, or is that something we still want to consider?
I would advocate we absolutely do, because this idea is to tell people, call 211, go to Agency of Community and Commerce Development. These resources are available to you. I think it's a very small thing that could help some folks.
Okay, thanks.
I see we do have one member of the public attending the call. If you wish to speak or make any public comment, you can press *9 on your phone or raise hand in the Zoom app. I see no public comment. Are there any further thoughts from council? Questions from staff? All right. Well, thank you all for this discussion and Jim for bringing this onto the agenda. I think it's really important for us to be talking about these issues. This does bring us to the end of our agenda. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, Al.